Hello everybody, this is the 10th lecture of the IELTS with Mr. Haidar ALcasseer. We have this question. Look at the following statements, questions A to 8 and the list of people below. Match each statement with the correct person A to G. Nota bene, MB, which means a note. You may use any letter more than once. We said any letter could be used more than one time. That means could be used once, twice, three times, but also at the same time some other letters, some other people could be also extracted. Okay, now let's come to the statements and the list of people. Statement number 1 says current conservation concerns are focused on a broad range of problems. Number 2 says conserving land is too expensive for farmers. Number 3, holding farmers responsible for land misuse makes no sense. Number 4, Australia should review its import or export practices. Number 5, more conservation funds should be put into helpful, practical projects. Number 6, much of the land in Australia is unspoiled. Number 7, whether research can help solve conservation problems. Number 8 says those involved in conservation are working together more efficiently than before. The list of people are A. Jason Alexandra, B. Robert Hadler, C. Dean Grades, D. Helen Alexander, E. Neil Clark, F. Michael Pittman, and G. Steve Morton. Okay, today we have Australia's growing disaster. Today we are going to use a different way of answering. We will read the passage and look for the statements which are suitable or which match. Now, let's start. Farming is threatening to destroy the soil and native flora and fauna over vast areas of Australia. What price should be put on conservation? Australia's National Greenhouse Gas Inventory Committee estimates that burning wood from cleared forests accounts for about 30% of Australia's emissions of carbon dioxide, or 156 million tons a year. And water tables are rising beneath cleared land. In the Western Australian wheat belt, estimates suggest that water is rising by up to 1 meter a year. The land is becoming waterlogged and unproductive or is being poisoned by salt, which is brought to the surface. The Australian Conservation Foundation, ACF, reckons that 33 million hectares have been degraded by salination. The federal government estimates the loss in production from salinity at $200 million a year. Okay, we see here in those two paragraphs, the first small paragraph and the second paragraph, we have no names. No scientists are mentioned in order to look for the answers. So we just leave them. We don't have to look for the answers here. Why? Because they are related to names of people, which means to scientists. So we move immediately without losing our time. We just move to the other paragraph. Here it says, according to Jason Alexandra of the ACF, according to Jason Alexandra of the ACF, this list of rules is evidence that Australia is depleting its resources by trading agricultural commodities for manufactured goods. In effect, it sells topsoil for technologies that will be worn out or redundant in a few years. Okay. We have here a very important point in this paragraph which says, let's start from the second line. This list of rules is evidence that Australia is depleting its resources by trading. Okay, here it's number 4. How do I know? Let's read number 4. Australia should review its import and export practices. Import and export means trade or trading as it is mentioned here. So that means number 4 will be Jason Alexandra, which means A, up to the list of people. Okay, let's move. The country needs to get away from the colonial mentality of exploiting resources and adopt agricultural practices suited to Australian conditions, he says. Robert Hadler of the National Farmers Federation, NFF. Okay, Farmers Federation NFF does not deny that there is a problem, but says that it's illogical to blame farmers. It's illogical to blame farmers. Okay. Until the early 1980s, farmers were given tax incentives to clear land because that was what people wanted. Okay, it's illogical to blame farmers. If we read number 3, it says, holding farmers responsible for land misuse makes no sense. And Robert Hadler says it's illogical to blame farmers, which means 3 will be Robert Hadler, which is B in the list of people. Okay, let's go on. If we have any other answers here. If farmers are given tax breaks to manage land sustainably, they will do so. Hadler argues that 2 reports on land clearance do not say anything which was not known before. Australia is still better off than many other developed countries, says Dean Grates. Okay, now we have Dean Grates. Let's focus on his speech. An ecologist of the CSIRO, the National Research Organization. A lot of the country is still naturally pristine. He says it's not a transformed like Europe, where almost nothing that is left in natural. Grace, who analyzed the satellite photographs for the second land clearance report, argues that there is now better cooperation between Australian scientists, government officials, and farmers than in the past. Okay, let's go back to the speech. Dean Grace, an ecologist of the CSIRO, the National Research Organization. A lot of the country is still naturally pristine. If we read number 6, much of the land in Australia is unspoiled. Unspoiled means pristine. So number 6 will be Dean Grace, and that means C in the list of people. Okay, we still have another one. Number 8 says, those involved in conservation are working together more efficiently than before. If we read the last 3 lines, argues that there is now better cooperation between Australian scientists, government officials, and farmers than in the past. That means the people who are involved. Okay, so number 8 will also be C, which means Dean Grace. Okay, let's go on. But The vulnerable state of the land is now widely understood, and across Australia, schemes have started for promoting environment-friendly farming. In 1989, Prime Minister Bob Hawke set up land care. Be careful, Bob Hawke is not in the list of people because he's not a scientist. A network of more than 2,000 regional conservation groups. About 30% of landholders are members. It has become a very significant social movement, says Helen Alexander. Okay, please let us focus on this one. Okay, uh, let's reread it. It has become a very significant social movement, says Helen Alexander from the National Land Care Council. We started out worrying about not much more than erosion and the replanting of trees, but it has grown much more diverse and sophisticated. If we just if we just read the sentences, the statements, we have number one says, current conservation concerns are focused on a broad range of problems. Let's reread the speech of Helen Alexander. We started out worrying about not too much more than erosion and the replanting of trees, but it has grown much more diverse and sophisticated. That means we have a range of problems. That means number one will be D. Okay, now let's go on. But the bugbear of all these conservation efforts is money. Lanca's budget is $110 million a year, of which only $6 million goes to farmers. Neil Clark, an agricultural consultant from Bendigo, in Victoria, says, the farmers are not getting enough. Farmers may want to make more efficient use of water and nutrients and embrace more sustainable practices, but it all costs money and they just don't have the spare funds. He says. Clark also says scientists are taking too large a share of the money for conservation. Many problems posed by the agriculture to the environment have been researched to death. He says, we need to divert the money for a while into getting the solutions into place. Australia's chief scientist. Okay, up to here. Let's come. We see 2 and 5 are suitable for what he says. I will read them and I will give the answers here. 2 says, conserving land is too expensive for farmers. 5 says, more conservation funds should be put into helpful practical projects. Okay, 2, conserving land is too expensive for farmers. We find this in the 5th line of the end. Farmers may want to make more efficient use of. Okay, it's before that. Sorry. The 3rd line says, Neil Clark, an agricultural consultant from Bendigo and Victoria, says, the farmers are not getting enough. Conserving land is too expensive for farmers. Farmers may want to make more efficient use of water and nutrients and embrace more sustainable practices, but it all costs money and they just don't have the spare funds, which means conserving land is too expensive for farmers. Okay. Number 5 says more conservation funds should be put into helpful practical projects. We have here from we need to divert the money for a while into getting the solutions into place. Okay, we need to divert the money. That means more conservation funds should be put into helpful practical projects, which means if we read from the previous lines, Clark also says scientists are taking too large a share of the money for conservation. Many problems posed by the agriculture to the environment have been researched to death, he says. And we go on to the end of what we said previously, so that means it's number 5, which means it is E. 2 and 5 are E, which means Neil Clark. Okay, let's go on with it. Australia's chief scientist Michael Pittman disagrees. He says that science is increasingly important. Meteorologists, for example, are becoming confident about predicting events which cause droughts in Australia. What that means, number 7, whether research can help solve conservation problems, because he says a meteorologist is a scientist or somebody who knows about the weather, who predicts the weather. Okay, if this can be done with accuracy, then it will have immense impact on stocking levels and how much feed to provide, says Pittman. The end result will be much greater efficiency. Up to this moment, or so far, we have finished everything here. We finished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 statement. That means we finished all the statements. I just want to show you something. We have here Steve Morton of the CSIRO G, the list in the list of the people, he's number G. We don't have any speech for him that suits or matches one of the statements. They just put him in order to mislead you. This is how they try to trick you in the answer questions. I will read it. Steve Morton of the CSIRO Division of Wildlife and Ecology says the real challenge facing conservationists is to convince the 85% of Australians who live in cities that they must feed a large part of the bill. The land is being used to feed the majority and to produce wealth that circulates through the financial markets of the cities, he says. One way would be to offer intensives to extend the idea of stewardship to areas outside the rangelands so that more land could be protected rather than exploited. Alexander agrees the nation will have to debate to what extent it's willing to support rural communities. He says it will have to decide to what extent it wants food prices to reflect the true cost of production. That includes the cost of looking after the environment. We have nothing here to talk about the environment, the intensives, or food or feed or whatever. So they've just put in to trick you. We come to the end of this lecture. Thank you very much. If you find it beneficial, please just press the button of subscribe. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments. If you have any criticism, please just write it in the comments too. Thank you very much. It was Haidar ALcasseer with you. Thanks for watching.